Hello, and welcome into the first episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake of the Texas Rangers, along with Evan Grant, the Rangers' longtime beat writer of the Dallas Morning News. And on this week's episode, we're going to have Rangers Hall of Famer Michael Young talk about the past and the present in his role with interacting with Bret Boone. We'll also be talking about Bret Boone's first week as the Rangers hitting coach, and then later we'll have a 40th anniversary moment from the Rangers archives.
All right, well, let's get on with this.
Okay, so basically I retired full-time at the end of last season. I've been looking for something to do, so Evan and I came up with what we think is a really good idea.
Actually, I got a call from John's wife, Harriet, who asked me to please get him out of the house because he was driving her crazy. So I came up with this idea, right? We're going to do a podcast about the Rangers that kind of borrows from my experience covering the team on a day-to-day basis and from John's experience of 40 years of history with the Texas Rangers and 47 years of history in Major League Baseball. So here we are with the SportsDay Rangers podcast.
If you want to follow us, you can follow us on X, which used to be Twitter, under either Evan_P_Grant, or I'm at Ranger Blake, which is much easier to remember.
Yes, every week we're also going to plan to have at least one guest from some time in the Rangers' past or their current. We'll talk about some items from the archives. We'll talk about the current team. We'll have a little bit of fun, and who knows where else this will go. You know, where John and I are concerned, a lot of times it's just devolved into yelling at one another.
So if you like the show, you can rate and review it and share Sports Day Insider. And we'll help other fans find the show, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Hopefully we'll have a little fun with this. So we're going to start with looking back at a week in review kind of thing and looking ahead. And it was a pretty momentous week for the Rangers, Evan. A lot changed, and a lot of it revolves around a former all-star second baseman with the Mariners, Bret Boone.
Yeah, you know, John, look, I think that Chris Young has been very proactive this season in wanting to make sure that this offense is everything he believed it would be. And the Rangers tried what small tune-ups they could make to the offense. And then I think reluctantly they got to a point where they said, can't get rid of the whole team, can't change out the whole team, got to make some other changes. And that led to the ultimate decision to let Donnie Ecker go. And I think that, and we'll get into this with Michael because I think he played a little bit of a role in this, but the way that Bret Boone ended up as the Rangers hitting coach is rather unusual. A guy who had no experience as a hitting coach, but has oodles of experience, right? 14 years of playing experience, 2 top 10 finishes in the MVP voting, 3 All-Star appearances, and 2 Silver Sluggers. So he's got the bona fides, and he's got something that I don't think the Rangers really had on the hitting side, is just somebody who walks in with that immediate cachet.
And testing this, having a new hitting coach, going on a road trip to Fenway Park, and then going to Detroit, playing one of the hottest teams in baseball, maybe not the greatest recipe, but if you look at the results, especially those last 2 games in Detroit, where the Rangers outscored the Tigers 16-4, and just watching it from afar, and you were there, the approaches look good. I mean, two-strike approach, comfortable at the plate, moving the line along like they did in those first 2 months of 2023, and I'm not comparing it to that, but they were able to kind of move the lineup along and be productive.
Yeah, you know, I mean, people will focus on the fact that in the Saturday game in Detroit, they hit 5 home runs, which was a season high. But for me, the important things that I saw, aside from the slugging, was that Wyatt Langford in that game scored 3 runs without a hit. Adolis Garcia had 2 RBIs without a hit. And we know this team can run into some balls and hit home runs, but I think where they were coming up short was they weren't optimizing individual run scoring opportunities. And I've seen more of that in the last week. And as you know, I've always been a glass half full guy, rose-colored glasses.
Sure.
You know, you look at this last week, they did go 3-3 on the road trip. That's their first 500 week-long road trip of the year. They did win a series at Detroit, which had the best record in the American League. And that was their first series win in over a month. And if you go back and break down some of the games, the one loss in Detroit was to the reigning Cy Young Award winner, and they lost that game 2-1 and had chances. And then they lost a game in Boston, and that would have given them that series as well, where they had a lead and kind of, one of the rare times the bullpen couldn't hold it, but also the offense couldn't tack on. So I think it was a very encouraging road trip for the Rangers. I'm not going to sit here and say Bret Boone cured it all, but I do think that there is, there's always a message that goes across to the team when you change coaches, and some of it is if you're not getting along with a coach or you're not getting the messaging, maybe you have a better interaction, but also it's notice to the players that you guys haven't done your jobs. There's more that needs to be done. So I think all of that is a part of it. And then look, I wrote about this at the start of the week. I think the biggest thing Bret Boone has done when he's come in here is said, look, guys, I'm going to listen first. And you and I both know who Bret is and know his whole family and know that they can talk and they've got lots and lots of stories. And he's even said, look, listening's not my forte, but I think he's tried to listen. And I think the message that he's tried to get across has been watch the game, see the game, play the game. Pay more attention to situations than you do to your biomechanics and how you're standing at the plate and what pitchers are going to do in different counts. And I do think it's freed them up just a little bit. Maybe that's just a narrative, but it does. I can't argue with the results.
Well, the thing is, too, at the beginning of the season, everybody thought, boy, this lineup is going to be deep, 1-9. And as the season has played out to this point, that's not the case once you get past the first 3 or 4 guys. And just going back to that 2023 season, and I'm not comparing it, but that lineup from 1-9, you could produce. Like I said, you could move it along. And at least in a very small sample, like I said, you kind of saw that in Detroit.
I agree. And they scored some runs in not just slug mode. And I think that was important. And I think that's the kind of thing that builds some confidence to say, hey, this approach worked in that situation. It's okay. Evan Carter on Sunday reached out on a 2-strike, 2-out hit to just kind of bloop a ball into right field, scored a run. He hit his hardest ball of his pro career the night before with a 111-mile-an-hour home run. But as big as that was, it was just blooping out a little flare into right field to score a run. So I do think that it's not going to be a giant turnaround in a snap, but I do think there were some signs there that either whatever had gripped them has kind of loosened its hold a little bit, or that they are kind of just a little freer.
Let's look ahead a little bit. As we're taping this, the Rangers have a big 4-game series with Houston starting on Thursday of this week. Rangers and Astros have had quite a rivalry the last few years. And that's really, as you look at it, I know we're looking at it here in mid-May, but that's fairly big series to kind of set the tone, I think.
Well, it is. And the Astros have won the last 7 full season American League West titles. They have been, with the exception of the 2020 season, they have owned this division since 2017. So they are still the bellwether. They've lost a number of players, but they are the bellwether, and they are the benchmark by which you compare yourself. So the Rangers need to come out and play well against the Astros on that front. The other thing for me is they haven't played particularly well in the division yet. And I think that they need to make a statement that, hey, we are going to be a force in this division. We are going to play well in the division. So it is a big series. And then with the Astros, you don't play them again until I think the second week of July, right? Leading right up to the All-Star break. It is the series that leads into the All-Star break in Houston. So it's important for the Rangers to come out, just like in 23, they went to Houston, won 2 games there early, and I think it broke the hold a little bit. So, yeah, I do think it's important for them to have Houston come in here and say, we're back to where we were in 23.
And then I just want to touch a little bit on the starting pitching. I was looking at some things over the weekend, trying to come up with a time when the Rangers have had 4 guys in the rotation that have been as dominant as the top 4 are right now, in Evaldi, DeGrom, Molly, and Patrick Corbin. And it's really hard to find a time when you have guys that pitch in different styles, and in the case of Evaldi yesterday, the mix of pitches. It is a hard team to hit against those top 4 guys in the rotation.
I thought of Eovaldi on Sunday when he threw 4 different pitches, and I'm going to get the numbers out of order, but he threw 22 of one, 23 of another, 24 of a third, and 25 of a fourth.
Right.
You don't get more balanced than that. And I think the 24 was curveballs. It's the most curveballs he's thrown since he's been with the Rangers. It's impossible to get to really get a hold on a pitcher in that situation. I did go back and look at the end of the week where this rotation stood or where this pitching staff stood, because I couldn't break it down rotation and bullpen.
Right.
But I think the ERA going into the week is or after 40 games was 3.47. Best staff ERA since 2012 when Yu Darvish was still a phenomenon.
Right, dominant in his rookie year.
And Joe Nathan had come
Nathan
on to
was really good
to be the bullpen guy. So, look, the Rangers have had good starts like this. I don't think they've had guys with the long-term credentials that you have with DeGrom and Eovaldi at the top of the rotation. Now, look, they had their injury bug at the end of spring training with Cody Bradford and John Gray going down, and you as well as I know, you're not going to just make it through the season with 5 starters. But to this point, they've gotten every starter has made every start. Leiter missed 2 with the blister. But they haven't had any long-term injuries. That's going to be the question. If and when something crops up, will they have the depth to replace it?
And if you look historically, obviously teams that can keep their starting rotation intact and healthy do better. I mean, historically over a season, if you look at like 2011, for instance, 5 guys made 29 or more starts for the Rangers. And look at that season.
Yeah, that was the most viable season.
And in 96, when they won the Stars won 75 games, kind of the same thing.
I think you had 4 starters that had 200 innings that year.
And it goes kind of hand in hand. And again, you're right. You don't know what's going to happen. But I do think it's very encouraging.
I do too. And I will just say this, and I want to get to, we're going to bring Michael Young here in a minute, but I do want to just say that the other thing that I thought about last night is this offense has not hit full stride, and it's been without its desired 9 players entire season. Because let's face facts. Going into spring training, the hope was that Evan Carter was going to be the everyday center fielder.
Correct.
So the fact that they now have Carter, that they'll hopefully have Jake Berger, and that hopefully Corey Seager will all be there. They're going to probably have to manage some stuff for the first half of the season, maybe the first 4 months. But in the real world, if you just get yourself healthy for the final 2 months of the season with the talent that this club has, it's got the ability to sprint to the finish if this team is healthy.
Well, we're honored. I think it's an honor to have as a first guest here on our first SportsDay Rangers podcast, Michael Young, 7-time All-Star, was an All-Star at 3 different positions, 5-time Rangers Player of the Year, which matches the most ever by a player. 7 seasons of 300 or better average, 6 200-hit seasons, the 2006 All-Star most valuable All-Star Game most valuable player, and a 300 career hitter, which that's very hard to do. And since 2014, special assistant to the general manager for the Rangers, Michael. And I forgot. 2016 Rangers Hall of Famer, and had his number retired in 2019. So, Michael, we really appreciate you doing this. I know it's a huge honor for you to do this first interview on our new podcast.
It is, JB. It's a good honor for me to be with you, and then we'll put up with Evan in the meantime. But it's a tremendous honor for me to be sitting with the great John Blake.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for writing your own introduction. That was really appreciated. You probably left out a couple other details, but
I did. I did. You guys left out a couple. You owe me money.
Let's say this. I will say this. Michael is also off the field an incredible father and husband. Just watching him and his relationship with his kids and his wife Christina for 20 years now, it's nice to see. So that's the nicest thing I'll say.
He's also the franchise leader in most offensive categories, and I will leave it at that. And let's get on to today's topic. And it's been an interesting week for the Rangers, Mike, with a new hitting coach, which you apparently had an interaction with about 10 days or so ago. What can you say about that?
I mean, it just the classic right place at the right time thing. So I'll make this really really quick. I went with my two younger sons to the USC UCLA baseball game. Um, Coincidentally, Booney was throwing out the first pitch. USC alum threw out the first pitch. I think for a 1 p.m. start time. I shot him a text, something along the lines of "Don't bounce it," standard, first pitch banter. He responded, kind of saying, "Hey, where are you sitting?" Told him where I was sitting. Told me he'd come catch up in a couple innings, and we just started talking. We started talking about hitting, catching up. The hitting coach job was not discussed. That's not my lane. But once the organization decided to make a bit of a change. In fairness, I thought that our previous hitting coaches were great guys. We won a world championship in large part to the work they did with our offense. And that's always a really, really difficult thing. But once kind of like the decision was made to sort of switch gears, I just started talking about, kind of relaying the content of our conversation. It was something that I think Siwa was kind of looking to go in that direction. Long story short, Siwa kind of took it from there with Boch. At 1 o'clock, he threw out the first pitch, and then shortly after, he was the hitting coach for the Rangers. So, again, right place, right time. If I had gone to the Sunday game, the Sunday USC UCLA game, I'm not really sure we'd be here right now. But again, I have a ton of respect for what Booney's done in his career, for his hitting acumen. It's something he's super passionate about, and I hope our players will be the beneficiaries of it.
He also has stories. Bret can talk, which you have to be able to do to have a podcast like he did. And he told me a story in Detroit about an interaction with Edgar Martinez. And I'm guessing that at some point in time, that same conversation had happened between you and he. What's your version of what he told you about the lesson he got from the time around Edgar?
Yeah, we were bouncing a bunch of ideas off each other. And the biggest thing was, we felt like, how does in-game hitting look like? What does in-game adjustments, in-game coaching look like? And then he just started talking, but the biggest thing you can do is really encourage interaction with the players themselves. And he mentioned a time that he was playing with Edgar in 2001 where they just had that incredible season. And I think it was a sort of a blowout game. Seattle was winning, and Edgar had a guy on second, nobody out, hits a ground ball to the second baseman, moves him to third. And I think Booney asked him after the game why he decided to give himself up in a blowout type game. And Edgar just assured him that he wasn't really trying to give himself up. He wanted to hit a line drive in the opposite field gap, but in the worst case scenario, he'd get the runner from second to third. And it kind of just opened Booney's eyes a little bit, and Edgar just basically told him, listen, my job here is to make sure you guys know I won't bail. I'm here to do a job for the team at all times, regardless of the score. And it kind of opened Booney's eyes to real situational hitting, real team offense, and what it means to sacrifice for the team at all times. It's not something that's it's a non-negotiable with good offenses. They're going to do their jobs in fundamental situations. So Booney said, if Edgar's doing it, I'm doing it, and if I'm doing it, then the 25th guy is going to do it. And it sort of created a little bit of a mojo for that 2001 Seattle team, which obviously went on to have an incredible season.
That's a funny thing. Like I tried my best to recreate as Boone told this story in Detroit. He got on a roll, and it was by the end of it, it was one thing led to another, right? It was this guy sees this guy sees this guy gets an RBI and builds his confidence, and the whole club gets rolling. And I tried to relay that the best I possibly could, but there was a lot of words in there. And then I got a text from Tom Grieve the morning after, and he said, I was reading that Boone quote, and it sounded like Ron Washington was talking. And it did kind of. He really got on a roll when he was talking about this stuff. And he does have that infectious kind of approach to hitting and being, at this point, I think, encouraging.
Yeah, I agree. I think, when you get into the middle of team offense and what it means to change an approach based on situational need or team need, I think you're talking about how you build team camaraderie. And this isn't something that's new to baseball. This is something that's fundamental in the game. This is something that's fundamental to any environment, work environment, sports environment, amateur sports, pro sports. It doesn't matter. You want to build team camaraderie, and the best way to do that is to sacrifice for the people around you and know that you're prioritizing things that are fundamental to the game. So again, this isn't anything that's groundbreaking, but it's making sure that you're really, really hitting on the fundamentals and stressing them and prioritizing them. And it was something that Booney spoke to, and I certainly agreed with it. So we'll see if the guys can kind of take it from there.
Mike, what about, we all know that the way coaching is at the major league level has changed a lot since you were playing, and you've got a chance to see it a little bit at the WBC in 2023 when you had a very large coaching staff like major league clubs do now. But what effect, and you went through this once in 2011, and it was a different situation when we had Rudy Jaramillo as our hitting coach for a long time, Clint Hurdle in 2010, and then they bring in Thad Bosley to start 2011. It doesn't go great. Scott Kuhlbach comes in for the second half of the season. What is it like as a player when you have a change with a hitting coach in the middle of the season?
It could be good. For the 2011 team that you mentioned, I think it was good. I hate to say that. I don't like to see people lose their jobs, but it was a good thing. I think the team needed a bit of a reset, a reboot, and it paid immediate dividends. I'm a believer that a hitter's best hitting coach is himself. All the pregame prep has to be done on his own. He has to do all his film work. He has to study the opposing team, study the opposing starter, their bullpens, everything. He has to make sure that by the time that he gets to the ballpark and does his cage work or goes into the pregame hitters meeting with the hitting coaches, that's all secondary information. I'm a big believer that the hitter has to be his own best coach. But I do think, though, that those coaches can provide some really good positive tones. And the ones who have a tendency to make big impacts during the game are the ones that have, in my opinion, have a tendency to do the most impactful work. So again, that 2011 team, it was a needed change, and I think we kind of got going right away once Cooley arrived. Hopefully, it's the same thing with Booney. We're off to a bit of a good start, and hopefully, it continues into this homestand.
I've always had this kind of oversimplification when people ask me about changing coaches and all of that. I don't think that any coach that you had, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, that any hitting coach that you had greatly differed in what they were trying to get you to do at the plate, but it always comes down to messaging. Being a coach, as Chris Young said, the best ones are psychologists. Is it about messaging? Or was it more technical when guys came in and were changed out?
Yeah, I think that might be generational. I think that it's more technical now. I think that a lot of times guys see their pregame prep work as being technically solid. They want to make sure their swings are dialed in, which of course is true. You have to make sure you're technically sound. The best athletes do things technically correct. Having said that, once from a personal standpoint, I felt like my swing, once muscle memory had built in and I'm hitting literally every day, I don't think my swing is going anywhere. I think it's pretty grooved in. And the best way for me to come out of that swing is for me to make mental errors during the game. If I feel like I'm a little wound up and I'm in a bit of a tough spot and my mind speeds up, my body's going to speed up right behind it, and here comes that snap hook ground ball to third base. So I do agree that the psychological component is the most important. It's how these guys are in their best swings, the things they're working on the entire time. How they come out in the game is reflective of what their mental headspace is like. So I'm a big believer in that, yeah.
So I'm going to jump back a little bit since I'm old and a historian. We're honoring Elvis in about a month or so for the Hall of Fame. So I just want to go back to that period, because as I've been looking at this, that 2009 to basically 2012 Ranger team, you could see, Mike, you could see it coming with the younger players in 2008 and 2009, and then with some additions there, and just the chemistry and the camaraderie you guys had. What do you remember most about that?
Like you said, John, the chemistry and the camaraderie were pretty incredible, and obviously the talent spoke for itself. But before those stretches, we had some incredibly talented offensive teams. I mean, you mentioned, even before this. So 2008, that's Josh's first year, and he takes the league by storm. But a couple of years before that, we have Mark Teixeira, we have Alfonso Soriano, we have, there's other players that were making Hank Blaylock. There was players that were making. Gary Matthews had an incredible year. There were players making big impacts, but it wasn't a very well-rounded club, obviously. So right when we kind of got to 2009, you can see a more well-rounded team taking shape. A lot of those guys that I mentioned were gone at that point, and we had sort of started to fill those holes. Kins had arrived, solidified his role. Josh, Nelly at that point had kind of broken through and established himself, and it was starting to really, really take shape. And then you all of a sudden you play together for a year, and then the second year, and now there's there's a really, really tight knit group of guys, and that's what we had. And all of a sudden you start filling in with some of the young pitching that's arriving. You have Colby come over. Now we're in a position to be super aggressive at the trade deadline. Hello Cliff, and it got to be a lot of fun at that point. But the chemistry really, really was special. So I think our fans really kind of caught hold of that. And a lot of times the question is, was that real, or was it something that maybe was made too much of? In that situation, it was not. It was 100% real. It was incredible being around that group. It was for that stretch, like you said, that 4-year stretch, whatever it was pretty damn cool coming to the ballpark every day.
Hey, this year is actually the 15th anniversary of the 2010 AL title, the first in Rangers history. Maybe we should have some kind of day at the ballpark honoring that team, John. But that's aside. Other than that, Michael, I think most fans and media, I think like their chief memory of the 2010 season and that run is Neftali Feliz striking out Alex Rodriguez to end the ALCS. I'm just wondering, is there something that in your mind it more crystallizes or encapsulates that season?
Yeah, I mean, I could talk a long time on this one, Evan, but I think the biggest thing I remember was right when we signed Vladdy before spring training, and before I left for camp, I did I think an appearance out here in Dallas, and everybody's asking me the same questions I get asked before every season, and every season was the same answer. If things go our way, we have a shot, and by our way, I meant all of us are on fire and several angels get hurt. That was basically us things going our way. Let's just be honest. They had us outgunned from a talent perspective. But going in 2010, after we signed Vladdy and taking him out of their lineup and putting him in ours, that was the first time I was like, all right, we just have to play our game. We should win. And then that started building momentum. So I think by the time we got into June, we went off on this crazy little stretch where we started playing really good baseball. I think there was a quote from one of the Angels players, and they were complaining about their interleague schedule versus ours. And I remember thinking, we got them. If they're worried about that stuff now that we're playing Pittsburgh, whoever else we played against, no disrespect to the Pirates, of course, but if we're playing these guys and they're worried about that, the tables have turned. We got them now. And that's when things really started to build. And again, now we get Cliff, now we finish strong, and then leading up to the Alex moment where Neffy punches him out. And but again, to me, it started much earlier than that.
And just getting back to a little bit and tying it into Elvis, it's going to be, I think it's pretty cool that he will be the 2011-2012 infield. All 4 members of that infield will be in the Rangers Hall of Fame. I do think that's a pretty significant accomplishment.
I think so too, and I'm looking forward to being there. And the thing is too, we're still all so close. We don't get an opportunity to talk every day. We all have families of our own, and Ken's has got older kids now. His daughter's in high school. Adrian's got kids in college, and Elvis has got a super, super young family that keeps him busy. But it's pretty cool that we're all very close and we're all connected in such a special way. So it's something that I don't take for granted. It's a highlight of my career being able to play with those guys.
Now, and last year during the All-Star week when they had the Futures game and you guys were all either on the staff or around, you got to see all of that camaraderie again, and it did. To me, there was nothing forced. And for you, you got along with so many of your teammates, but just that special group, it's so clear that you guys genuinely liked one another. And I think all approached the game with the same kind of dogged, as dogged competitors. I think that's what it was for you guys. It was all about competition. You thrived on the competition.
I agree. I think we were all very like-minded in that sense. We were all different, right? You have Adrian and Ellie were Dominican, and you have Josh and Kins and Murph and myself from here, and Elvis is Venezuelan, and you can go on and on about all these different backgrounds that these guys have. But ultimately, we were all super connected in the way that how much we love baseball, and how much we really, really love to compete and how much we love playing together. It was a really, really special group, man. I think about it a lot. And again, when I think about my career, um, I've heard before, I think when Greg Popovich just retired, they were just giving some clips of him and saying how wins and losses kind of fade over time. And it's 100% true. But the memories I have of playing with those guys, they don't go away. If anything, they strengthen over time. And it makes me, feel super fortunate that I got a chance to suit up with them and play the game I love with them.
So, last question for me. After the 2013 season and you announce your retirement, you get an invitation to a wedding, which most of us never believed would ever happen, that Evan was getting married. And you accepted the invitation. And at that wedding in February of 2014, you run into John Daniels, general manager at the time, who had traded you the previous winter. And I'm not going to say this is the Camp David peace accord, but there was a little détente that took place at the wedding that led to the role you have with the Rangers now. Can you talk about that a little bit, or do you not want to give Evan any credit?
I can do both. I can not give Evan any credit. I'll give Gina credit, Evan's lovely wife, because like you said, I mean, it's a miracle that he was even there in the first place. Um, I think that was a really cool day for me. One, to be there to celebrate, Evan's wedding. I was honored to be there. But JD and I hadn't really talked. We were really, little backstory, we were really, really close before all of the, stuff with the trades and the position switches. And to this day, I don't think that the public really has a firm understanding of everything that happened, and that's by design. I think those things should stay tight. But clearly, JD and I kind of got off the rails a little bit for a while, and I had no problem actually. No one had heard a peep about me complaining when the team traded me. I had a tough year in 2012, and sometimes tough years have consequences. And I ended up having a great time in Philly and LA. And at that point, when Evan's wedding was still was happening, I was weighing re-signing with LA or retiring. But I went to Evan's wedding, and I think Evan put JD's table right next to mine, so it created a little bit of an awkward environment. Thank you.
I didn't seat you at the same table.
What's that?
I didn't seat you at the same table.
True. So anyway, I was like, you know what, man, I'm tired of this. JD and I were close at one point, and we can be close again. And I shot him a text, and I was like, so we gonna get a drink or what? And we went to the bar, and we started talking, and we caught up a bit on family and the past season that we had. And it kind of led down to a pretty cool road of one, he and I kind of reconnecting and just talking again, putting all the stuff from the past behind us. And then it led to my role with the Rangers now, which even being here now, I thank JD for it. JD is the reason that I have this role. He believed in me enough to bring me on, to keep me connected with the Rangers and keep me connected with the organization. He's the reason that I'm here. Obviously now I have a relationship with CY and Ross and Josh and all of our scouts and players and staff, but JD's the reason that it happened in the first place. And I'll always be super grateful. We had a great chat that night at Evan's wedding. Again, we were able to that's kind of provide a launching point for us to kind of dive back into the stuff that happened before. Both of us kind of expressed a little bit of regret, and know that we learned a lot from it. But to this day, he's one of my very, very good friends. We keep in touch. We talk a lot. We talk baseball a lot. But again, one of my really, really good buddies, and very proud to call him a friend. Proud that we had a tough moment and put it behind us.
But really, it was the juggling clowns that brought you together.
No, it was not. We reconnected in spite of juggling clowns. Matter of fact, I can't believe there were juggling clowns there, and I actually stayed. So it was definitely some higher powers that kind of kept me there.
I should just clear this up. I have cousins who are clowns, John, and you know this now. They are certified clowns, not Ringling Brother, Barnum and Bailey clowns, but they performed. And whether in the Grant family, whether or not you wanted them to or not, Karen and Bounce were going to juggle at your wedding. And they grabbed Gina, they put a paper rose in her mouth, and then they proceeded to juggle bowling pins until they knocked the rose out of her mouth. And they feel like that it's kind of a ritual and a rite of joining the Grant family, that somebody be able to stand in there. And she made it. She was a trooper. But yes, I've heard many times about, I had clowns at my wedding.
In my opinion, that will never be the highlight of that wedding. It was the JD Mike
Yeah.
conversation.
What he's leaving out, and by the way, this isn't a shot at family. I'm all for family, but clowns also, they sell meth on the side and they steal cars. So I'm not suggesting your family does that anyway, Evan, but that's what clowns do for me. This is why we have a very adversarial relationship.
One time, I believe a clown attacked you coming out of the dugout.
It did.
Who was that clown?
It was Elvis. Yeah.
You going to wear a clown suit to his Hall of Fame induction?
Great call. Unfortunately, he probably wouldn't even bat an eye. Like that's the thing. He's kind of sick in the head. He probably think that clown was actually invited and has a front row seat to his Hall of Fame induction.
He does kind of thrive on clowns. Michael, listen, it's great to catch up with you about Rangers history, about this current team. I know that lots of guys in baseball have special assistant titles. I don't know that there are a lot that work any harder than this group with the Rangers, and you and Ian and Nick Hundley, who's a senior advisor, and Colby as well, and Darren Oliver as well, that you guys do put in the hours and you do talk baseball, and I think you are a really good group of sounding boards for Chris Young and for JD before him. But it has been it's been a real pleasure to watch you guys kind of interact and how much effort you actually put into a role that a lot of clubs view mostly as ceremonial. So hats off to you for that. Thank you for joining us. And next week we'll have a guest on who hopefully will talk a little bit more about you, because it's going to be all about you.
Oh, I know you're bringing on. So, I mean, he's got some stuff on me, that's for sure. So, congrats on the job, guys. You guys did a great job.
Right,
Thanks, Michael.
thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
One other thing that we're going to do here is highlight John's current work, which is artifact collector. He is in charge of the Rangers Archive, helps coordinate the Hall of Fame. If you've been fortunate enough to take a tour out at the ballpark, you may have John showing you around. And so we're going to dig deep into his little closet at the ballpark full of artifacts and talk a little bit about this week in the archives. John, what's something from the Rangers history that kind of applies to where we're at right now?
And we could use a good working title for this. This Week in Archives is a little bit, I took it after This Week in Baseball, which was TWIB, so this is TWIA, I guess. But we could use, if you got any suggestions, please send them in and keep them clean, please. So I went back for the first one, and we're going to do this kind of every week, I hope. Try to take an event around the time of year, a time of the week we're taping the podcast. And I'm going to go back 40 years ago to May 16th, 1985, when Bobby Valentine was hired as the manager of the Rangers, an in-season hiring. And just to preface this a little bit, this was my first full year as the Rangers PR director. It was also the first full year of Tom Greaves' tenure as general manager. He was only 37 years old, so he was pretty young. And one thing that I learned and have tried to learn throughout my career is one of the toughest things to do is to orchestrate an in-season hiring with a manager. I have found this historically to be the case. And in this current one, I will say the Rangers flunked this totally. So going back, just to kind of set it up a little bit, Doug Rader was the manager of the team. He'd been hired after the 82 season. Doug did not wear well with the veteran players. The team did not have a good year in 1984. They brought him back for the 85 season. And again, Tom Greaves was kind of inheriting him. And we got off to a horrible start. I mean, I think we lost 7 of our first 8 games. We didn't play well. And they came to a conclusion that it was probably time for a new voice to lead the Rangers on the field in May of that year. So the team president at the time, Mike Stone, the first person he reached out to was Earl Weaver. Now, I had worked with Earl Weaver his last 4 years as the manager in Baltimore. Earl had been retired for 2 full seasons, and predictably, Earl turned them down. I mean, why would Earl Weaver... When Mike told me he was going to ask Earl Weaver to, he was going to call Earl Weaver. I said, Mike, I can't imagine he's going to have any interest in this job. He didn't. But ironically, a month later, he came back and managed the Orioles when they fired Joe Altobelli, and that didn't work real well for Earl either. He should have stayed retired the last year and a half in Baltimore.
They just can't stay retired.
So in that case, after that little dalliance with Earl, Tom Grieve really was high on Bobby Valentine. Bobby Valentine was 35-year-old third base coach of the New York Mets. They had played together in New York. They had gotten real close. They talked baseball on the bench during the last couple years.
Right. To Michael Young's point, right, that's one thing that Tom has always talked about, how much he and Bobby talked on the bench when they were both bench players for the Mets. And they watched the game, they talked about the game, and Tom felt like he learned a ton from Bobby.
Right, and Bobby was brilliant. He was young, but where we were, it was probably the right way to go. The way we orchestrated it, however, was not the way to go. So Valentine,
Why? What happened?
Valentine was the third base coach of the Mets, and the Rangers were on a 3-city road trip while this was going on. We started in Detroit. Didn't play well. And then we went to New York to play the Yankees. So instead of firing Doug and bringing in an interim manager until they had worked it out with Valentine, Grieve and Stone flew to New York and met Bobby at Newark Airport. And of course, it got out. And so poor Doug, and Doug was tough. Doug was, Evan knew Doug a little bit later on, but Doug was a very intimidating man. And I was the only one on the road trip that knew what was going on. And poor Doug came up to me 2 days in a row and said, am I getting fired? And I said, Doug, I don't know what's going on, Doug. But it was so awkward. And so they worked the deal out with Valentine. We have a day game in New York, last day in New York before we're going to Chicago. And the thing I do remember about this, there was no hot water at the hotel that morning. So everybody is coming down griping about the fact that it was all cold water. We play a day game in New York. We lose on a walk-off for the second day in a row. At this point, it's been reported that Valentine has got the job and was getting ready to fly to Chicago. And there's nobody, Doug has not even been told. So we get on the plane. It was a commercial flight to Chicago from New York. The writers, of course, were all on this plane because they couldn't wait to see what happened. And we get to O'Hare in Chicago. And again, this was a commercial flight. And this was before the day of cell phones. And Mike Stone and Tom Grieve had flown ahead to Chicago. They were in a suite waiting to tell Doug that he was fired when we got to the hotel. So it was blatantly obvious what was going on. So I dash off the plane and get on a payphone while the team is going by to say, hey, we landed. We'll be at the hotel in 35 minutes. So they would be prepared. And they left a message for Doug, at the front desk, Mike said, call me when you get there. And the other thing is, in that case, Rader reported to the team president. He didn't report to Tom at that point. It was very...
That's an odd structure.
It was very skewed. Yes, it was. So we get to the hotel, and Doug knows something's up, obviously, and he wasn't even going to stop at the desk before he went out to dinner. So I'm sitting there saying, oh, man. So I have to go up to Doug and say, Doug, you better check your messages here before you go out. So he did. They call him up to the suite. They let him go, and the writers were incredulous at how we spent an hour and a half with Stone, Grieve, and me, and the writers were just berating us at how we handled this. And they didn't even like Rader, and they knew that we hadn't handled it well. But long story short, Bobby managed that night in Chicago. He brought a burst of great energy to the team. He managed more games than anybody except Ron Washington in team history. And he brought in Tom House as pitching coach and Art Howe as his batting coach right away. And I think it was a great move for the team, but I learned a little lesson there in how not to handle a manager firing 40 years ago.
You've handled some unusual changes in your time. I mean, just in my time alone, there was, Johnny Oates resigning a month into the 2001 season. that was, I think, difficult for everybody because Johnny was so well thought of. But I think he had kind of gotten sideways with where the club and the new ownership was going. But at the end of the 2001 season, when the Rangers decided to make a change at general manager, and the club was in Seattle for a rescheduled season finale, and the penultimate day of the season, I had called John, say, hey, let's go out and grab a drink or grab some dinner after a night game in Seattle. And John answers the phone. He says, I got a bad connection. These were early cell phone days. Got a bad connection. I try to call him back. Phone doesn't answer. Next day, show up in the press box, and here comes young Rich Rice, who had just started on the staff a year earlier, and no John. And Rich is handing out press releases that Doug Melvin had been relieved of his duties. Come to later find out that when I reached John, he was actually in the Seattle-Tacoma airport.
I was actually on the plane. The plane was getting ready, the red eye was getting ready to take off to go from Seattle back to Dallas so I could handle the press conference on that Sunday with Tom Hicks.
So the moral of that story is, once again, I was behind the times on knowing what was going on with the club, but Doug Melvin was fired at that point in time. And then you also had the unusual situation in which Ron Washington resigned in 2014 with a month to go in the season. And certainly he wasn't going to be – I don't think he was going to be fired after that year. But I do think that with all the stuff off the field that was going on with Wash at that point in time, it certainly took an unusual turn. But look, you have – and we'll get into this in further episodes. I do look forward to one thing – that in the PR guy, beat guy relationship, we're trying to find the news and we're trying to find the details, and you're trying to manage crisis after crisis. And I'm going to be interested in hearing your perspective on how different crises moments within the crises. So that'll be interesting to find out. But for now, John, I think that's going to be it for the premiere episode.
Yeah, one last thing on that. And you'll see, I regret how that came down with Doug in 1985. And I did try to learn from that and into giving advice to general managers, owners, whatever it was, as time went on. And you kind of learn. You learn from your experiences. And but that's the way. But we'll talk more. We have more stories to come in the latter weeks.
All right. So for all of us in here at the SportsDay Rangers podcast, thank you for joining us. If you've got any questions, you can email them to me at egrant@dallasnews.com. You can tweet to us, as John has said, at Ranger Blake or at Evan_P_Grant. Let us know what you think. Let us give us some comments and some direction. We'd like to make this a really fun podcast for all of you who follow the Rangers and follow the club's history and follow the club's fortunes. So until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us here on Rangers Sports Day Podcast.